support in ensuring that the policy formulation supports the development agenda. So we are doing capacity building through various programs. We are also engaging ourselves with the policy research and analysis, and as well as partnerships. And that is why we have brought you here, because you are a partner, you are also a key stakeholder in the public policy process. You are also the source of some of the information that we gather as we do our policy analysis. You are also the people that we call upon when we want to disseminate our information, because all that we do is we generate evidence, and many of you are actually implementers. In addition, when we have a capacity building program, we can't build our own capacity. We build capacity of yourselves and the institutions that you are representing. So in this regard, you can see that as an institution, our motto of thinking policy together is actually actualized in the three major areas that we operate. I would say that as we go forward in the next 5 years with our new strategic plan, which we'll be launching very soon, we have also thought through on how we can continue supporting the government, not just in the formulation, but also in the implementation process, coming up with various tools, like now we have what we call the Public Affairs Index, which we launched in 2022, at the beginning of 2022, with the support of FCDO. And with its Public Affairs Index, we are able actually to see where we are, even at county level, as far as the development agenda is concerned. At the moment, we are also preparing ourselves to get to the field to develop a new index that would help us in monitoring how we are doing in relationship to climate change, looking at climate change preparedness index. And this will support the government agenda in terms of how we respond to the impact of climate change. These are just among the many things that the Institute is doing. And for you honoring our invitation to come here, you learn a lot from what is displayed at the back and what we'll be presenting to you. And since my role at the moment is actually to welcome you, I would like at this time to welcome my chair of the board so that he can tell you much more on what we have managed to achieve. Thank you very much. Karibu sana, Professor Ateng.
Professor Njugunda Ndung'u, CBS, the Cabinet Secretary, the National Treasury and Economic Planning, Mr. James Muhati, Principal Secretary, State Department for Economic Planning, representatives of governors here, KIPPRA board members present, Dr. Rose Ngugi, Executive Director, KIPPRA, Chief Executive Officers present, private sector representatives present, development partners present, members of the media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm very pleased to welcome you to our celebrations today. This is a day of profound significance as we commemorate both the Kenya Institute for Public Policy Research and Analysis, commonly known as KIPPRA Day, and the 60th anniversary of our great nation, Kenya. This occasion allows us to reflect on the journey that our esteemed institute has traversed, marking our contributions, our growth, our impact, and so many other good things that we have done since KIPPRA was established. As we commemorate this historic milestone, we pay homage to our forefathers and heroes who laid the foundation upon which we stand today. We honor their sacrifice, their vision, and their unwavering commitment to a better Kenya. For those joining us for the first time, let me briefly spell out some of our key milestones in delivering on our core mandate. In 2003, KIPPRA Young Professionals Program for youth aged 34 years and below was established. Since then, the Institute has graduated about 273 young professionals who are contributing and enriching their respective institutions with the knowledge acquired from the program that they got with them from KIPPRA. Further, the Institute launched its KIPPRA mentorship program for universities and TVETs in the year 2018. Its overall objective is to create awareness and develop capacity for the university community in understanding the public policy making process. Students under this program for the universities participate in policy debates, policy research, and various programs facilitated by KIPPRA. Since its launch, this university program has been held in 16 universities and impacted more than 5,000 students. KIPPRA undertakes policy research and analysis to support evidence-based policy decisions. One of the key outputs of this research is the Kenya Economic Report. This flagship annual report reviews Kenya's economic performance and provides prospects for the medium term. The Kenya Economic Report was first launched in the year 2009, and KIPPRA has so far produced 15 editions of the report. To promote the exchange of views on issues relating to public policy, the Institute has held 6 annual regional conferences since the year 2018 on various thematic issues, covering over 6,000 delegates from diverse sectors. Another innovative engagement platform is the Public Policy Repository. The repository provides a one-stop digital reservoir for all national and county policy documents, as well as KIPPRA is testament to the transformative nature of the KIPPRA Public Policy Repository. In addition, the Institute coordinates the Kenya Think Tanks Forum and provides a platform for a structured exchange of ideas between think tanks and the government. Through this, KIPPRA has co-hosted 4 annual Kenya Think Tanks Symposium that focus on topical policy themes. Ladies and gentlemen, looking ahead, the KIPPRA vision remains steadfast for forward thinking. We are committed to intensifying our efforts in evidence-based policy formulation, advancing innovation, and harnessing power of vigor for sustainable development. This involves a continuous dedication to staying ahead of the curve, embracing technological advancements, and capitalizing on the potential of data analytics to derive informed decision making. Our chief guest, it has been our desire to establish a research center that enables us to effectively deliver on our mandate. Such a research center would, for example, help us expand our capacity building program, especially the Young Professionals program. Currently, we engage 30 young professionals, but we receive very many applications which signals the interest in the program. We also want to have a footing in every county and regionally, and the office space we have at the moment is very squeezed. We are aware that the Office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary coordinates government activities. However, without a coordinated mechanism on development of policy documents, policy coherence may be a challenge. In this regard, the role of a clearinghouse for policy documents becomes necessary to ensure timely review, government-wide consistency, and coherence. KIPPRA can provide this support. KIPPRA can play this role very effectively. I want to thank the government for the continued financial support. KIPPRA is a pride of many in the region. As we put our aspired structures and systems together in implementing our strategic plan, we look forward to continued support from the government as we have received in the past. As I conclude, allow me to appreciate the KIPPRA team for putting together such a wonderful and successful event. I urge all the participants to engage with the KIPPRA staff present here today to learn more about the Institute's products and services. I hold firm confidence that with our combined determination, expertise, and unwavering commitment, KIPPRA will persist as a trailblazer in capacity development, policy research, and analysis, contributing significantly to Kenya's continued journey towards sustainable development and progress. Ladies and gentlemen, I say, Happy KIPPRA Day. Ladies and gentlemen, I also say, Happy 60th Anniversary, Kenya. Let us celebrate and recommit ourselves to a future that holds promise and progress for all. With that, I now return, and I'm also very honored to invite our Principal Secretary of State Department for Economic Planning, Mr. James Muhati, to give his address.
I want to take this opportunity this morning first to recognize the presence of the chief guest this morning, who is the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury and Economic Planning, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u. CS, I was surprised that today actually you are able to make it. And this is just to go in the same direction to commend you for the support that you have given all the activities that have to do with the KIPPRA and also the Ministry and the State Department of Economic Planning. The schedule of the CS has been back-to-back, I think, for the last 3 weeks. Even as he sits here, he's supposed to be in another function. But the fact that you make that sacrifice to come and be with us, we really don't take it for granted. We really appreciate. I also want to appreciate also this morning, acknowledge the presence of the CEO, the Executive Director for KIPPRA, Dr. Rose Ngugi, the Chairman of the Board, the board members who are present here, and also our host, the DG for KSG, Professor Ludeki Chwea, the CEOs from other state agencies, and the representation from the various agencies and stakeholders from the private sector. Good morning. Good morning. Oh, sorry. Good afternoon. I think it's very cold. I still feel like it's morning. Yeah, good afternoon. Yeah, I'm pleased to be here this afternoon, and also to comment the ED and the KIPPRA fraternity for putting together this particular function. I would look at this as your open day, and also to take the opportunity to be able to reflect about the country in matters national development, and probably what we need to do going forward, and also for the efforts on matters research, policy analysis, and capacity building for training in supporting the efforts of the government in national building. This is very commendable. I don't want to take much of your time this morning. I would want to invite the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, who is our chief guest, to be able to make his remarks. So it's my humble pleasure now to welcome CS. Please, if you can come on the stage to be able to make your remarks. Let's give him applause.
Thank you very much. Please be seated. Good afternoon. I also thought it was morning, by the way. And for me, it's not it's never surprising, because I think the time I start working and the time I realize the day is going, it takes a bit of time to realize that. And let me say that I was supposed to actually welcome His Excellency Musalia Mudavadi, the Prime Cabinet Secretary, but unfortunately we have so many. It's so difficult to protect time. I think he's in a judiciary function where I was supposed to be, and so I'm telling him that please offer my apologies, and I also offer yours here. So essentially, that is the way, the nature of the work that we do. There are so many issues, there are so many things that we have to deal with, but also there is very little time to do that. We start early in the morning and we end up very late in the night, hoping that the next day things will be well organized. Let me recognize, of course, Professor Ben Ateng, the chairperson of the KIPPRA board, and the KIPPRA board itself, and my colleague and PS for economic planning, James Muhat. And let me say that the officials of national governments and county governments that are present here, distinguished researchers. I'm at home as a researcher. Some of you have come across me and even my work at KIPPRA, but it's just to say that it is just the whole idea of channeling information and sharing that information that keeps us going. That's the world I come from. It's the world I believe it's the world that should work much better than every other world. I hope this thing can work, can stay. That doesn't seem to know how to stay, because I have to read my speech at the same time. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be part of this great event where we celebrate KIPPRA Day, and also Kenya at 60. And the choice of the theme Kenya at 60, accelerating the national through public policy, is quite material to me. And it's also very important that we reflect on the role of think tanks in Kenya's development discourse, And KIPPRA is one of the first national think tank, and I think the only think tank. So many think tanks have come in after that, but the national think tank is always important for us because it is the one that the government relies on in terms of policy analysis, policy advice, and showing some analytical component of what is required. So we are at that age where we require analytical capacity to support evidence-based policy making and execution of national development plans and even the content of policy. That's the world I believe in, and that's the world I've come from. And so I'm also part of the KIPPRA alumni. So I hold a very special position whenever KIPPRA is concerned. I shaped the KIPPRA from the early years, and I still continue supporting KIPPRA. Even in my earlier life, I was coordinating think tanks in Africa, national think tanks in Africa. Thank you very much. I even reformulated one of the objectives of African Economic Research Consortium is actually to coordinate national think tanks in Africa so that they can actually create a platform for policy influence. And Rose will tell you that I formulated the objectives of AERC so that they form one sentence. You raise the quality of research and products from AERC so that at least they can shape the capacity building, but also network with the national think tanks so that you can influence or create a platform for policy influence. The whole idea is to ask why the policy influence. If you can't see the correct picture, then you cannot make the right choices. And that is why that analytical content is very, very important. That work that you're trying to do is very, very critical. I remember when I was pushed to go to KIPPRA. By the way, I was forced to go to KIPPRA by the Vice Chancellor, and I've seen that he's in the program, so when he comes, I hope I'll see him. The Vice Chancellor then was the chairman of the new board of KIPPRA in 1999. I still recall that because he wanted to have me interviewed, they described the kind of people they would like to have in KIPPRA. They went on and on until when my turn came to speak, I told him that those people you have described are not yet born. And they burst out laughing, together with several other people. The late Dr. Getu, who was the PS Economic Planning, the late Mwangi Kimenyi, who was now the CS and a friend of mine because we had known each other in our research world, and other people in the panel. So they told me, we hope you are joking. I told them that we have designed even graduate programs in the AERC starting from 1991. We had ushered in graduate training program at African Economic Research Consortium. And because we had done that, because of the analytical incapability across countries in Africa, and we were trying to train people who could manage to provide analytical work and even policy direction. Before that, it was the IMF has said, but you didn't understand what the IMF has said, isn't it? The World Bank has said we need to have these reforms, but you didn't understand the implications. So we needed someone to mediate and say this policy direction is going to give us this kind of output. That is why from 1988, AERC was trying to raise capacity for African economies so that they can actually promote that analytical capability to midwife between the policy direction that you want to have and the implications so that you can assess and monitor results. It was very, very important. But my work, when I was asked by Professor Gishara to go to KIPPRA in 1999, my work was actually to develop the macro model for Kenya. James Mohat now is responsible for that. I was telling him that it took me 2 years to develop a macro model for Kenya, but it could not have taken more time because of developing that analytical tool. The biggest problem is that you needed to show evidence. And I went to so many institutions. I still remind them why they refused with information, but they didn't know what the information was for. And we developed a macro model, and it's still in operation. I know we are just due to revise it. I gave a commitment that whenever you want to revise the model, the KIPPRA macro model, I'll be available to provide the core of the analytical content and the core theory, because I'm still active. By the way, I'm still active. I still write my models. What we did in that model, I think we developed, is it 266 equation, a model of 266 equation rows? And then what I did was to convert it into an Excel solver so that the Treasury, the National Economic Planning Unit, and now is an MDA, can actually test different scenarios without having to affect the core of the model. Is still active and can produce fantastic results. I remember IMF was the first one to go and test how much poverty, it can reduce poverty, and we can have scenarios in terms of investment, reduce poverty, or growth, poverty relationship. So we did that, and we even pulled some of the 66 equations that were some behavioral and trained a department in KIPPRA to focus revenue, because revenue is driven by growth. By the way, most people who are talking out there about high cost of living and taxes, they don't seem to understand that it is the vibrancy of growth that generates revenue. And we taught KIPPRA department how to forecast tax revenue on the basis of growth. So you can imagine it works across so many aspects. So that's why the subsequent work that has been done in KIPPRA relies very much on the outcome of the macro model. But the most important thing is to understand where the macro model stands with Kenya's development discourse. We're talking about Kenya at 60, then we can see, did it change the tide of economic planning? So I'm aware that KIPPRA is part of the team that has supported the National Treasury in development of the report on the cost of hunger, socio-economic impact of child nutrition in Kenya, KOHA, and it's also participated in so many of those organizations that have been led by the African Union Commission, through which countries estimate socio-economic impact of child undernutrition. Some of these aspects, some of these new tools, analytical tools or development tools, cannot be developed at the ministry level. You can imagine, Chairman, I'm saying it was so difficult to protect my time, and I forgot to talk about Mr. Chua. We have come a long way. We were in school together. I forgot to mention you, but whenever I come here, I find I'm still at home. But it's so difficult because you have been even the peers in the Ministry of Government, local government, isn't it? Home Affairs. You know how difficult it is to sit and do some work. I didn't realize. I was able to do some very technical work at the central bank, but not at the ministry, because we are buffeted by so many administrative works and all that. But that's why we needed a technical unit like KIPPRA. But Chairman, I also don't want you to have branches in all the counties. That's not your work. We want you to be like, well, which am I a member of? I mean, I'm a distinguished fellow of Brookings. We want you to be like Brookings. It is okay to have young professionals program, but situate it within the same. Don't ask for branches, because then you become another ministry, isn't it? Let him do the work of going to, Muhati should do the work of going to the counties and having branches. But for you, remain, because once you spread yourself thinly, you lose out, isn't it? Anyway, that's for you, but I just wanted to make sure that you understand that. Today, Kenya is among the 25 countries that have undertaken KOHA study, for example. And that allows us even to look at other things like demographic health survey. It allows us to do some analysis and also to look at whether the policy is working or not working. I still recall, by the way, when I went to the central bank, I complained a lot. When we were developing the macro model, one of the blocks that refused to converge in our analytical work was the monetary policy block. Rose, you remember that? I wanted to come up with a monetary policy block and then also develop an equation on monetary policy reaction function, because it was good to test policy using a monetary policy reaction function. But it could not converge for weeks. I tried all my analytical tools, and I was getting frustrated, so I went to sit with some of my friends in the central bank. They did not provide the data. And they told me they use an IMF model. I told them IMF doesn't have models, it has just linear programming stuff. We are developing a behavioral structure of model here so that you can use the components or the coefficients of that behavioral model to actually predict policy. But they could not hear that. So when I got no help, I got frustrated, but one night I remembered I had published a paper in 1994 showing that actually outside money is the one that drives inflation in Kenya, not inside money. But then somebody gave it logic and said it's because central bank actually intervenes in the foreign exchange market, so it wants to conserve forex. Then I realized that, so it is not interest rates that drives monetary policy, it is the nominal exchange rate. So quickly I reformulated the monetary policy reaction function using the nominal exchange rate. It converged within the first iteration. I was very happy about it, and I made sure I pulled it out. Rose, you remember, I pulled it out to become a paper. So for the young scholars, please look at that paper and you'll see what it really means. You are struggling with theory the way it should be, but in practice somebody is doing something else, isn't it? I didn't have kind words to say about how policy should be derived, because actually monetary policy reaction functions, you should use the instrument, that is the interest rate, not a target variable or a relative price structure, that is the nominal exchange rate. It's just an example of where we get lost in that. So I can talk about so many things until cows come home, but I will spare you, because that is not what we would like to do today. We want to celebrate KIPPRA's contribution to the national development goals through capacity building, through policy research, and even analysis that provide platforms for policy engagement in an easy way, in an understandable way, but also making sure that you are doing that work and following it up to make sure that it is implemented as a policy, and that policy will have a positive outcome. In my whole life, I've tried to use my own research to try and understand why that policy did not work. Coincidentally, I've also gone to places where I can use that knowledge. That's why in the central bank I was using the knowledge of papers that I had published in inflation, exchange rate, and even how monetary policy works through the economy. In the Treasury now, I've done more work including climate change in the last few years or so. So it is becoming very important. And that is why we want to encourage KIPPRA to have those diverse sources of knowledge and expertise so that we can draw down on that when we are formulating the policy. So it's also a gesture that KIPPRA becomes a very patriotic institution that would organize events like the one we have, and we can actually talk about Kenya in the last 60 years. And we can actually ask ourselves, how do we compute the memory line? This is an assignment I want to give to young economists, and not just economists, even political scientists, institutional economics, economists, and even sociologists. Why do I say that? Because I want us to say that we can trace the economic development discourse for Kenya, and you can have different dimensions: the core economic theory, the policy space, the institutional space. You can have everything. So we can have all the scholars in it, and we trace where we have come from. And we can learn from the policy mistakes, and we can have some information in terms of how we coach the future policy package. and how we assess the future policy paradigm in terms of how it works. We have so many people who have written about that, and in the 6 decades we can talk about a lot of things. We criticized the import substitution approach, or as it was as a paradigm or a policy agenda for the country since after independence. We criticized it because 2 dimensions is that it emphasized capital intensity in a capital scarce country. So it means that the price of capital was going to be very high, but more importantly, it produced goods that had forced demand. In a sense, we thought we would build a manufacturing sector with a strong base, but we didn't. Then we came to export-led growth, and because we wanted to replicate East Asian tigers. Then we realized that actually we did not actually move beyond the first stage of import substitution, so it was going to be very difficult for you to have an edge in terms of the competitiveness of exports. We were even failing to provide our exports, the exports of the products that we have managed to produce. So you can tell right now, when you look at the data in the last 50 years, you see a secular decline of manufacturing output, manufacturing GDP. And somehow you have to come back to the data and ask and extrapolate and ask yourself, why do we have that secular decline of the manufacturing GDP? And then if you look at the data again in the last 50 years, you'll see that we have a secular decline in the export sector, and export to GDP has been declining. For us, those are very, very important aspects to try and ask yourselves what we have been doing, but you will find several answers. And I can tell you, so one of the answers is that if you look at our capital accumulation, we were trying to mitigate or imitate or even to replicate East Asian miracles. You will find that their capital accumulation rate has been quite high, and capital accumulation has thresholds that actually ignite economic transformation. We never get to those thresholds. And even when we use external borrowing, that is domestic debt, using if you've seen my latest work on growing with debt in African economies, you will know that it was supposed to beef up the capital accumulation so that we can reach those thresholds. But we haven't. So in a sense, it's something we can talk about as a combined force of saying, where have we gone wrong and what do we need to do? So we can talk about those in many ways, but it will be good information to use just to let us know that you should not forget the future. I can focus attention on bottom-up economic transformation for now and actually say that it's not a model, it's an agenda. It's an agenda because it's a realization of where we have gone wrong, both at the institutional level and the policy level. We have to recognize that we have left so many people behind, and there is no model to bring them back, but it's an agenda to work through certain interventions, policy, actions, and even administrative work through our institutions, and we can actually succeed. And the recognition comes from very strong empirical analysis that shows that strong growth can actually eradicate poverty, but has to be supported by strong focus on targeted social protection ecosystem. When we summarize that study in African Economic Research Consortium that we started in 2018, everybody was skeptical about what that time we were calling redistribution. But we succeeded during the COVID time in Kenya, isn't it? Within no time we had created targeted social protection programs which, coupled with the cross-reduced the preference of spread of COVID-19. So it means that targeted social protection programs can actually work, and they can be used to flatten inequality. But since then, we have seen what the drought effect has done. It has actually reversed most of those gains. It has produced massive inequality, pushed poverty eradication back to about 20 years, but more importantly, it has also created social conflict because of water resources. So in a sense, we really need to ask ourselves, what do we need to do? And especially with bottom-up better, me and Muhati, we always forget and call it better because we have been lied. We are used to writing the sables. The better, so is better. Bottom-up economic transformation agenda. It allows us to focus on 4 areas to support growth, and especially with the realization of where we have come from. Let me mention those 4 because I have had a lot of debate in the last 3 or 4 years in this area. And the first one is human capital development. And here we want to look at education, what has happened, health, what has happened, labor markets, what is happening in the labor markets, is it allocating the appropriate labor talents in the appropriate institutions, and even nutrition. Is there what you see in the labor force, what you see in your human capital indicators depends very much on the basis of nutrition achievements. There's a lot of work that has been done. If you want, and KIPPRA has participated in this because we did some work on human capital development starting 2018, isn't it? It was funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation because I argued with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that African economies will suffer in the future and even growth potential because of human capital development. So when I was asked the other day, what do we need to do to revive economic recovery in Africa, I said it's the commonplace, human capital development. It's the same thing I'm saying. That is a starting point. Today, the World Bank is coming up with a new study with a new report, World Development Report next year, and it will be the question asking why middle-income countries stagnate. Do you know that? Are you familiar with the low growth trap in middle-income countries? Kenya is in the lower middle category, but all of them, when they had declared their middle-income countries, they stagnate. What happens? The first thing is actually human capital. In one of the studies that we covered in the AERC, we showed that actually our education system is going bad. We thought it was improving, but it is actually worsening. And even in that platform is becoming even worse. And you go to health indicators, they are even worse. When you go to labor markets, the labor market is not allocating the resources that we anticipate. If you look at nutrition that you stretch far back in 20 years' time, you see it's not working. The second aspect, which I would like perhaps to relate to the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, is how to support markets and market development. This morning I was talking to markets and telling them, and especially it was in the financial markets, telling them where we have failed and things are not working very well. Today, you find that in regions of Kenya where poverty has become more pervasive, it is because